That's
Just
you
gonna
now on.
share. So Ryan, I'm going to get you maybe just to let me know. Can you see the shared screen?
Yes.
Okay, happy enough.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get going. 8:05. We'll hopefully be read up for before 9 o'clock anyway. So thanks again to Ryan and all Ulster Camogie for asking me to come on again and again provide you with a wee bit of an insight in terms of sports science. I've been on before covering strength and conditioning and fitness testing and things like that. So we're going to maybe open it up a wee bit broader than the S&C realms, and we'll try and delve into some of the other areas of sports science that's becoming more and more prevalent in our games, both at a high performance and performance level. So I would imagine there's a varying number of coaches in here who are maybe coaching at different levels. So hopefully we'll try and try and hit the chord with everybody on some degree. I'll just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Eoin McNicholl, and I'm the sports science officer for Ulster GA. I have worked in a number of different teams and sports, both at inter-county level all the way down to academy level, and at different clubs. Just in terms of Camogie, I haven't worked with Camogie as such, but I have worked with the Dunloy team, and I see a couple of Dunloy fellas in there this evening. So good to see you. So without further ado, we'll rattle on, and we'll get through our first few slides. So what are we looking to get out of this evening? So we're trying to identify what would a sports scientist do on a daily basis. Anybody that might be involved within your club or maybe who are interested, and even into yourselves, some of you are probably taking part in some sort of sports science work at some stage, and you don't even realize it. So it's given you an idea of like what falls under sports science, and then what maybe you're actually doing in terms of your own coaching practices. We'll outline some of the various disciplines. As I said, like sports science, there's so many different things that go on in it. It's just not, the common things that you might think about. There's other aspects of it, and how we can use sports science, as I said, both with like the high performance type teams. So that's your senior inter-county teams competing at high levels, and also like what you can use for your own clubs, your own levels, whether it be seniors, underage. What can you use and kind of filter it down to be able to get a similar type of impact with your teams, but maybe just not on such a high level. So whenever you think about sports science, a lot of people will think about the highfalutin things. You've got like a lot of expensive technology, you have lots of data-driven type of aspects of sport. Again, probably one of the things that does come to mind for a lot of people is like the S&C type of environment, and number crunch in terms of reps and sets and weights and things that should be recorded. So again, we talked about like it's a multifaceted approach where there's lots of different aspects of sports science, and I think it'd be very like if somebody was able to think about, we'll only pick one or two of these and we'll focus on these for our team. Whereas a good coach or a good coaching team should really be broadening the horizons in terms of what else is out there and what can the low-hanging fruit that could possibly help them in terms of the other aspects like psychology, nutrition, or even performance analysis. So in terms of sports science, we would use like a bit of a theory to it, and this is what we would kind of describe it by. So it's a multidisciplinary field concerned with the understanding and enhancement of human performance. So we talked about that kind of before there, that multidisciplinary type of things that are going on, just not the one or two things that people obviously think in terms of like maybe GPS or S&C. What else is out there that falls under the bracket of sports science, and how does it actually enhance human performance? All right, so yes, we're playing obviously in a team environment, but if we can, the saying says, like many ways builds a better team. Like if you get more people on that riding that wave for longer, you're going to have a better product from the whole team for longer. So how can that actually enhance human performance on an individual level, and then obviously as a result the team gets better? So we're using lots of different knowledge and methods, and there's theories that's probably been built up for years and years from lots of different tests and theorists trying things out. And probably as technology has advanced over the number of years, we've got to a stage where we can actually record, test, and probably give people a lot better value for their coaching and what they can get out of it. So just from that term there that we're looking at, things like biomechanics, has that actually entered into your head in terms of you as a coach? What can you use out of the biomechanical mindset to help your players, whether it be run faster, jump higher, strike the ball longer, as well as like motor control, motor development, all those things you have to take into consideration. Like the body just isn't made up of like the skeletal system or the bone structure and the joints. There's lots of different aspects in terms of like nerve aspects, neuromuscular development as well. And then obviously I've touched about their sports psychology. Now again, sports psychology, a lot of people think maybe it might not be for me. It's maybe for somebody who's maybe feeling a bit down and can't get the best out of themselves. But it's also, sports psychology is very powerful in terms of like getting players to reach their complete pinnacle, not just in the physical aspect, but also trying to get the mind frame right for every game. So that's just a wee bit of a bit of a snapshot of what we're going to be covering here this evening. As I talked about, keeping your mind that it is a multidisciplinary field. So there's going to be maybe 8 or 9 different things that we're going to look at, and we're going to try and cover each of these disciplines and maybe give you 2 of these slides on what would be a high performance and what might be more suited to yourselves who might be working in clubs. So as I talked about, say you've got a sports scientist or you've got somebody who in the field is interested in sports science. Now, a lot of you people are probably thinking out there, it's just sports science. Unless I go and do a degree in sports science, I'm not going to be able to do any of these things. But if you look actually down through them, a lot of them you probably are doing on a daily basis in terms of your coaching, but it's how you think about those and how you develop those practices to become better. So one thing, if you go down to the next level, you're talking about the researcher, the applied researcher, and then the coach. So most of you are all coaches. That's why you're here. You're looking to become a better coach, and you're looking to see how you can evolve sports science to become that better coach. But to do that, you need to be able to research, find out what works, what doesn't, and then apply that research into the field of training and be able to coach that. And as I talked about, that stems across the biomechanical aspects, the S&C, the nutrition, all of those different things. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on a lot of this here, give you a bit of an idea as to what might be included in each. So we talked about biomechanics. Basically, it's just the mechanics of how the body moves. So you can make this as easy or as hard as you want. Like obviously the high performance end of things, people have got like a lot more technology and things that they can use, whereas if from a coaching eye, if you can improve the biomechanical running or the striking of somebody, well then that's you acting in terms of a biomechanist, if you want, looking at joint angles, looking at stride patterns, looking at gait, things like that there, the things that you can maybe coach into your sessions and say, well, I've improved that person's running pattern because they're more efficient runner now because I've given them a few cues to do that. So the likes of the S&C, we've probably all developed into a world now where there's S&C in every club. There's gyms and clubs, there's S&C people within clubs, but also like there's maybe clubs that don't have that, especially in the Camogie end of things. Like there's strides there to be made. So again, trying to break it down, show what's happening at a high performance level, and then what you can do possibly as a club coach. The nutrition aspect of it too, again, we'll touch upon like what are the senior teams doing, what are the high performance teams doing in inter-county level, both football, hurling, camogie, and then what can you do for your own teams, low hanging fruit. Same with physiology. Well, again, we'll try and keep this as basic as probably as we can. The psychological element of too, as we touched upon, the skill acquisition. I find this very interesting at the minute, and there's a couple of good coaches in terms of skill acquisition out there, especially in hurling, which are developing very good practices, and obviously that transfers across a lot to camogie. So we'll talk about a few of those guys and how they're reaping rewards out of it, and also the performance analysis end of it. What's good practice in performance analysis, and what can you do on a club level. So as I talked about the biomechanics, right, and it's probably a very technical term, and as soon as that kind of thing comes to mind, a lot of people think, oh, it's not for me. I don't really know what that's about. I don't really want to get into much of it because it's maybe out of my comfort zone. Just to give you a bit of a snapshot, right? Biomechanics is the science concerned with the internal and external forces acting on the human body. So ground reaction forces, like you running, jumping, every force that you apply upon the ground is giving you a force back up again. So keeping that in mind, this is what we're going to get into in terms of the high performance end of things, where they're really starting to go into in-depth detail on how these biomechanic forces, I'd say, can be improved. Golf swing, cricketers, essence or track and field will use a lot of biomechanics, because when you're into that end of things, especially at an Olympic level, Commonwealth level, a lot of them it's a fine margins, and the more that you can get out of these small percentages, the better athletes they'll become. And I think, in terms of the field sports, we'll be getting more and more clued into the good practice of biomechanics, and this is filtering down in even to club level. And I've seen people using this to good effect, and I'll give you a couple of tips on how you can actually use good apps and software and playback video to players to be able to show them good and bad points. So this is just an example of how biomechanics might be used in a high performance environment. Now, obviously, this is like a baseballer, but we'll try to pick something of a similar sport that has a striking pattern. As you can see, this has been taken from, there's a bit of technology involved. So each joint would be coded, and then of that, it's transferred across into software, and you're able to see impact points. You're able to see the kinematic variation between the preparation phase to pausing phase to strike through and trying to generate as much force. And generally what that is just you're trying to replicate high forces and making the body doing that in the most efficient way. Now, again, as I talked about, this is high performance. It's maybe not going to suit the likes of the club person, but there's a few different things that you can do as coaches that might be a bit more on your level. So here's some cheaper options. What I have used and I do use in terms of looking at somebody's technique. There's apps out there called Huddle. Now Huddle is a cloud platform based where a lot of performance analysis videos might be shared on, but there's also a sub app called Huddle Technique, and it allows you to record somebody's movement in a very slow frame rate, and you're able to pinpoint the joint angles, and it's able to track that over time. So you can see the runner in the middle. You know, if a coach was able to look at this and able to look at their running pattern, you know, be able to say, have you a good enough forward lean, or are you too upright? Have you got a positive shin angle whenever you're landing and running? Or again, are you too upright? So those sorts of things, I say, are low-hanging fruit for club coaches and even inter-county coaches that can say, well, this is a cheap option for me. And even if I know there's a player in my team who is I just can see it. I always say, especially in the S&C environment, if something looks bad, it probably is bad. So if you can use something like this, an app on your phone, to be able to record that, feed it back to your player, slow it down, and the more things are slowed down in like a slower frame rate, the more it'll kind of give you, a better idea, and the player the better idea of where they might be going right or going wrong. So that's something to maybe explore for yourselves. Get a few players in your team, maybe do it from different angles, side on, front on, back on, and can you look into a bit more biomechanical aspects of your players' running technique, their striking technique, and what can you do to help them improve. So something for you to think about. Our next discipline we're going to look at is probably strength and conditioning. A lot of people have heard tell of the term strength and conditioning, and it's become very, very prevalent. Now, if we were to stream back to all those different disciplines we talked at the start, the biomechanics, the psychology, the skill acquisition, S&C seems to be at the forefront for a lot of counties and a lot of clubs at the minute. They seem to be buying into a lot of S&C, and if you're counting the contactors with teams during the week, they could be maybe spending 6, 8, 10 hours in a S&C capacity. So whether that be gym or on pitch. Whereas if you were to ask them how much time you actually spent on performance analysis or how much time you spend on psychology, that would probably be a lot less. So this seems to be becoming more, as I say, more prevalent, and there's more and more good practices that's happening within clubs. And again, I'll give you a wee bit of idea of what's happening in terms of inter-county level and what could be happening at club level. And it is very much interrelated between what's happening biomechanically, like physiology within the body, what's happening nutritional aspect. Are you recovering enough? Are you getting enough protein on board to help the muscles get stronger and recover? And the psychological aspect of it, like this has probably become more prevalent within the last number of years. And if anybody wants to do any later reading, there's a guy, Nick Winkelman, who is the head of athletic performance for the Irish rugby team. And he's brought out a book called The Psychology of Training and the Psychology of Strength and Conditioning. And it's basically how trigger words and key words differ and how the output actually differs between players. So say, for example, you're asking somebody who wants to do a sprint for 40 meters, what cue is giving them the most powerful output? You know, you might just think everybody says, right, want you to run as fast as you can. But if you tell players to give them internal cues such as push the ground away or drive, imagine your foot as a hammer and it's driving a nail into the ground, you're going to get a better output. And that's been proven through a lot of different testing. So that's one to think about. You know, how is your psychology, how is your wording been perceived with the players in terms of their output, whether that be your coaching sessions, your S&C environment, or whatever. So as I talked about, S&C or strength and conditioning is very much interrelated between the biomechanics. So if you can think running patterns, jumping patterns, striking patterns with the ball, and then what you're trying to do in an S&C environment is probably replicate a lot of those with load or with speed. All right, so you're trying to make players better, faster, and stronger in that environment. So then whenever they go to the pitch, they're probably a bit more robust to take those actions. So such as a tackle, such as maybe landing awkwardly from a high jump, you know, are they ready and strong enough to be able to do that? So as I say, motor performance is probably key in terms of a lot of that, but so actually is the capability of doing it and the capacity for doing it. So performance, you know, you're looking for speed, you're looking for power, you're looking for pace, but on the other end of the spectrum, you're looking for capacity, you're looking to build up a good capacity of doing those type of actions well, strong enough, and under good strength and load. What I would always, and again, I don't want to be going over the top of too many people's heads at this stage, but we're always trying, as S&C coaches, we're always trying to improve this thing here, which is called the force velocity curve. So if you can imagine this kind of time, this graph here. So the higher up you go in the graph, you're looking to increase or lift more force. And that would kind of equate to more maximal strength, whereas down along the bottom is geared towards less force and more velocity, which would be like your speed movements, so like your sprinting, your plyometric stuff, and then you've got everything in between. So how do you lift heavy weight, but how do you lift heavy weight fast? All right, and that's where the S&C people, the good S&C people, are bringing that into their practices. You know, good ways of lifting heavy weights fast is the likes of your maybe Olympic lifts, your throwing exercises with the balls, your speed exercises with weights and stuff. So I say a good S&C coach won't just focus on one of them, won't just say, right, we need fast players. It's very good to have maybe fast players at that end of the spectrum, but they could be very weak, you know, and if you have a fast player who's very, very weak, they're either going to get injured, or they could be going into tackles, you know, they're not going to be as robust enough to take those tackles or be able to get out of those tackles. So you always need to be kind of forcing that force velocity curve outwards all the time. You need to be practicing on the maximal strength, the power stuff, and the speed stuff. So that's just a few pictures there and what that might look like in terms of an environment in an S&C. So like a maximal strength exercise might be like a 1 to 3 rep deadlift or squat or bench press. A power exercise would be how quickly you can move heavy loads, so likes of your Olympic lifts, your throwing weights, and then your speed exercise, how fast you can move, you know, speed from different environments. And I will go back to like that speed changing from different environments, like in an athletic capacity or a track and field, you know, it's very easy for those people to practice that because they're only going one dimensional. They're only going in one space. They're only just trying to travel straight line as fast as they possibly can. Whereas in a pitch environment or a field sport environment, the speed needs to be multi-directional. So again, I'll go back to the team that was involved with in Dunloy there. We practiced a lot of speed changes of direction from different positions. So we could have been on press-up positions or kneeling positions or sitting positions, and then having to get up and accelerate to get to top speed. And it just so happened, like in the lead up to one of the county finals, that one of the fellas found himself in a kneeling position as somebody hand passing the ball 40 metres from goal, and it was just his efficiency to get out of that position and head straight for goals. And like, he scored a goal from running from 40 metres from a kneeling position with ball in hand. So again, keeping those things into consideration. What happens in the game, and can you replicate it into your environment? But look, as I say, those are kind of high performance ends. You know, good S&C people will think about that and how they can implement them into your training sessions. But somebody in a maybe lower level who wants to focus on, right, I want the basics. I want to know what can I do from a strength element to help improve not only the robustness of my players, but maybe a wee bit of performance then. So I'd always go back to like the functional movements. So like, are you covering the functional movements on a weekly basis? All right, are you doing your pushes, your hinges, your squats, your running patterns, the twisting exercises, your pulls and your lunges? You know, obviously you can't fit all of that in one session, so that's why it's nearly better to factor in that you've got 2 or 3 sessions of those a week, split into maybe upper days or lower days, or high intensity days or low intensity days, based around your other training. So again, not making it too complex or too complicated. It's just thinking, are you covering all of those moving patterns during the week? And then by doing that, you're already in a better place than you would be before, than if you're going to do, say, isolated movements such as hamstring curls or bicep curls, or just normal isolated bodybuilding style exercises. So thinking about actual functional movements more so than isolated muscle groups. And again, if anybody's any questions, just go ahead and jump in at any time, because I've got the screen up here beside me, so I can see all your chats coming in if you want to ask any questions at any time. And likewise, Ryan, if you see any questions come in there, just stop me and work away. So that again, that's the kind of as much as I want to go through in terms of the S&C. As I say, try and keep it as basic as you can, as simple as you can. And there's a lot of good people out there in terms of like who's practicing good athletic development right through the pathway, not just whenever you get to senior level, because I think that's a key thing. Not just landing with 17, 18-year-olds and expect them just to go straight into these type of movements, having not practiced them properly before. So the earlier you can start these kind of functional movements and build a good base, then the better athlete you're going to have by the time you want to go and do the likes of the Olympic lifts, or the big squats, or the big heavy lifts, later on in their pathway. So again, another area of sports science that we'll look at, and again, nutrition wouldn't be my number one area that I would be have expertise on, but I understand the importance of it, because if you think, in the gym environment, you're maybe going to the gym 2-3 times a week max. How many times are you sitting down to fuel your body? 3, 4, 5 times a day. So it just stands a sense that what you're putting in needs to be good enough to make sure that when you're getting the right output. So again, thinking of it in terms of like a high performance end, what does actually happen that we need to do in terms of providing the athletes with the best advice and the best guidance that they can to be able to fuel their body in the right way. So we've got to take into account that carbohydrates is still one of the best sources that athletes need, and that's obviously goes without saying. You put in bad fuel into a car, you're going to have a bad engine, but if you put in good fuel into it, you're going to have your good engine for longer. Essentially, that's what happens as an athlete too. You want to have good nutrition to make sure that you're getting good quality carbohydrates, you're getting good quality release of those carbohydrates at the key times whenever you're looking for the likes of your competition phase. All right, so no good going and sitting eating a Chinese or a high-fat meal possibly the night before a big game. You want something that's going to be quick release carbohydrates to give them that burst of energy. Also thinking about in the high performance end, there's so many people now getting involved in ergogenic aids. So ergogenic aids, any aid supplement that is actually enhancing performance. So there's a lot of people taking caffeine. as a stimulant before both training and games, creatine to help with an extra energy source and maybe putting on a bit of extra muscle mass. Different things such as sodium carbohydrate, beta alanine. We see a lot of people now taking these juices such as beetroot juice, things like that there, nitric oxide to help give them that extra boost of energy. So those are all types of aids that players are now thinking, like, I'm getting as much as I can out of my foods. Do I need to take something else to get me to that next level? And that's what we're talking about. High performance, whenever they're getting to the point where they've covered all the basics and they're thinking about how can they just cover maybe the odd percentage here and there to help them along the way. So other things there, such as your vitamin D coverage. Obviously, we live in a world here or a country here that we're not getting a lot of vitamin D for large months of the year. So again, good S&C people or good sports scientists and doctors and physios will recognise that, and that's why a lot of county teams would be supplement with vitamin D on a yearly basis. So again, thinking about that as high performance, and a lot of people who think about the timing of their foods as well, as they go back to when is the best time to eat. So these elite athletes and high performance athletes will have this timed down to a T. They know exactly when they should be eating, what they should be eating, and how much of it should be eaten, to the extent where some people are actually doing blood glucose levels before games, and then if they need extra on top of that, then they're maybe filling it up with maybe an extra isotonic or some sort of energy drink. As I covered there, the supplement end of things has become a multi-billion-pound environment, and again, got to make sure that any player that's doing this, especially in a high-performance environment, whenever they're maybe entered into the likes of the inter-county seasons, could be subject to random drug testing. So you obviously want to make sure that whatever supplement they're on, that it's batch tested and it's safe enough to be taken within the season. So talking about, those are a lot of things that, again, your very good club players, your inter-county teams will probably be practicing at some level on a weekly basis. But if we strip that down, what should be good practice for you, for your team? I always go back to this kind of pyramid. I think it's very powerful and showing the players there's no point in going straight into the top level, and thinking that's going to be the best way for you to be fueling your body. And I've seen it in so many young players, young fellas who think, oh, I want to go to the gym and I want to get big, so I need to be taking all my protein, and I'm just going to take protein shakes, and that's all I'm going to eat because I need to lower my body fat. So I'm just going to maybe take 4 or 5 protein shakes a day. It doesn't work like that. You need to have the good quality, high quality whole foods to build the base, and then the supplements is only that. They're just a supplement on top of your diet. So again, if you don't have a good quality slow release proteins throughout the day, like if you're 25 grams or 30 grams of protein built through your meals, there's no point in taking a quick release carbohydrate through your drinking, and then it's just gone after a short period of time. So talk about the top end of things. The supplements and the sports fuels are good to do. They're nice to do, but everything else below that is probably more important than what's happening at the top. So the good quality whole foods, your micronutrients after that, and then the timing of those, just making sure that you're eating enough at the right time and you're not feeling too bloated, but you're getting enough energy to stand you through whatever test of exercise or training sessions that you're doing. So if you're taking anything out of that, just making sure that you've got the base covered, and then go to the second and go to the third. So try not to overemphasize too much what's happening at the top. Okay, so just moving on in terms of the physiological aspect. So what is sports physiology? Well, what it looks to do is investigate the effect of science on the function and structures of the body. So what does exercise do? What does your training do to the body itself? So in terms of the heart rate, what does it do to the muscle mass? What does it do to the body fat content? What does it do to the dehydration content? What does it do to lung capacity? And again, we're talking about high performance, but we'll filter this down to what might be more reasonable for you. So here's just a few, again, tying in with maybe the fitness test end of things. At the start of the season, you might do some fitness tests. One thing you want to do is height and weight. All right, so see what your players are, see what their weight is, maybe if body fat scales, be able to take a percentage of body fat, and then obviously as the season go on, if there's a few players might be with the higher end of the body fat or maybe not enough body fat, you can monitor that and say, well, this is something you need to do in terms of your training or your nutrition aspect to make sure you've got more or less of whatever it needs to be. So that's just one aspect in terms of the physiological aspect of the body. What effect does exercise have on the body? What the high performance teams will also do will be looking at the heart rate. So what does the heart rate do within games, within training sessions? And I can think of myself being involved in inter-county team as a player, going off doing certain runs or whatever. Maybe all the teams have a certain distance to do or a certain time to do it in, but ours were all timed. We're all going based on what was your fitness level. So you're waiting on your heart rate to come down to a certain level before you were taking off again and doing your high intensity exercise. There's no point in me doing it with, say, one of our midfielders, me as a goalkeeper. Those guys are a lot more fitter than me. And then coming back into their runs, I was maybe taking a lot more time to recover, whereas those guys, their heart rate had gone down to a quick enough level. They were ready to go again, had enough energy recouped again to go and do a high intensity burst of exercise again, whereas it was maybe taking myself a wee bit longer to recover before I was able to do that same intensity. So that's where the individuality comes out. And it's as simple as maybe, a lot of players you'll see them wearing their Apple Watches or their Garmins or whatever to training. It's maybe something like keeping an eye on their heart rate. Does it go up to a sufficient enough level to say that they're working maximally or sub-maximally, or whatever it is you're looking to prescribe, or have they recovered enough before they go off and do your next set, just to make sure that you're getting the right response out of them. So say if it's, you're doing pre-season, you may be doing a lot of aerobic work, maybe in season you want to do a wee bit more anaerobic work, so maybe multi-sprint environment. Are you giving them enough rest? Because I've been involved in sessions where you maybe think you're doing high intensity anaerobic training, whereas the coach doesn't give you enough recovery time. And because of that, your body's then starting to dip into the aerobic system and maybe use a bit more fat stores for the energy source. And you're obviously going at a slower rate because of that. So that's why I think heart rate is probably not utilized enough, but at the high performance end, it probably is. And then if you go to the likes of your universities, you've got, the likes of your VO2 max machines. They're able to tell you exactly how much oxygen you're intaking, how much carbon dioxide you're outputting, your lung volume or your output from your lungs. Those are high-end things that the likes of those people can do. But if we're going to strip it back to the likes of what can you do as a team for a club, well, as I say, the heart rate monitors are one of the best things, and a lot of people will wear them. One of the first things I had asked a lot of the fellas to do until now, whenever I joined them, was to, if they hadn't got a heart rate monitor, just go and buy a wee cheap one, and then we're able to put the players into brackets. Say if we're doing aerobic runs or anaerobic runs or high intensity interval runs, the fitter players are in one group, the less fitter group or players are in another group, and then you're sending them off at different times to get the right response out of them. Another one would be actual blood markers. So we talked about, again, when I was playing at the county level with a guy who was in doing his PhD, and he was also looking at the effects of the byproducts that were happening. So you've all heard of the term like lactic acid, when you get the heaviness in the legs, and a lot of people think that's lactic acid. So, but there's also a byproduct called creatine kinase, and it's actually a good marker in terms of how muscle damage that your body is. And again, as I say, there's markers there to say whether you're low range, middle range, or high range. So a lot of time we would have come to training. This guy was just like doing a wee prick of blood in the finger. He tested it. 2 seconds later, he was saying, "You're in the high range here." And then he would go back to the coach and say, "Well, he's 2 or 3 of these players are high end. They probably don't need as much high intensity training this evening." Or maybe if everybody was in the low end, he'd be saying, "Yep, everybody's good to go. Train them as hard as you need or as hard as you want." So that's just an idea. And again, there's people doing this at high-end club level, and people doing it at another county levels. So these are the type of things that are still going on, and players are probably educating themselves more and more. Believe it or not, in terms of this level, in terms of what they're getting out of their body and how they can push it to the absolute max. Another thing we'll talk about, and probably come into a lot of clubs again, is the likes of the GPS. And now, the last time I was on doing the presentation for the Camogie, I had just come across this research paper for the GPS stats for an All-Ireland winning team at Division 1. So I don't have all of the GPS metrics here this evening, but I'll show you 2 or 3 of them. So if you're ever wondering what a team might be covering in terms of total distance. So this is inter-county and all-Ireland winning team. This is the sort of metrics that they're covering in a game. So as a group, on average, about 5.8 kilometres per game. The midfielders will probably cover the most of that, and they will go roughly 6.54 kilometres per game. And then obviously a bit less for the defenders and forwards. Keeping in consideration the ball will probably spend a lot of time in around the middle third, so those midfielder players are always having to go always non-stop. So there's a lot more if you're thinking about who's going to be your best player in the midfield battle. It could be somebody who's high end in terms of your fitness tests or your testing element. But on the back of that, the fastest players seem to be the backs and the forwards. Okay, so they're probably having a bit less time or expending a bit less energy. So they're building up that energy store. So whenever that ball comes in, they're recovered and they're ready to go at full pace. So it's not much. There's not much of a difference in terms of the peak speed, but a lot of the studies will show, whether it's football, hurling, ladies football, or Gaelic football, a lot of the high-end peak speeds will come from the full-backs or the full forwards. All right, so just bearing that in mind, those are the types of people who maybe need that wee bit more burst of energy or burst of acceleration, maybe acceleration type training if you're prescribing it within your team. So in terms of psychology, now a lot of people think, again, this is maybe way over my head, but believe it or not, you are actually using psychology every section that you go out, all right, whether you believe it or not, all right, the wording that you use, the mannerisms you use, the body language that you use is all part of psychology, all right. So how can you best exploit that to get the best out of your players? So psychology, the term we use for it is, for most sports people, psychology is any mental activity that relates to performance and performance enhancement, all right. So taking that into consideration, the mental activity that relates to performance, right? So that might be things such as, visualization, motivation, goal setting, those type of things that go on in the person's head, maybe before a game, maybe even during the game, that they can think about and prepare for in the best possible way to be able to help them enhance their performance. This guy up on the top right, I don't know if any of you know him. His name's Kieran Kearney. Kieran's a sports psychologist, high performance sports psychologist. He's been involved now with the Dunloy team for 4 or 5 years. He's been involved with many inter-county teams. And I came across Kieran whenever I was playing for Derry in 2014. So he was brought in to help the team. And I knew the benefit of sports psychology probably before a lot of the other players have been involved in sports science degree. So I latched onto this guy first as soon as I could, because I knew that whatever I could gain out of his knowledge would also help me in the long run. And very astute man. He's involved with the sports science committee at national level in terms of the sports psychology. So anything that there is to know about sports psychology, Kieran is very good at it. But one thing that he has mentioned and really struck a chord with me, like, it's not counselling. A lot of people will think, oh, psychologist, there's maybe something wrong with that guy. It's not. It might entail counselling type skills, but it's not counselling, and it's not motivational speaking either. A lot of people think you want some guy to come in and give a one-off session, and this is going to be a great motivation to the team. Yes, that might be a part of it, but it's also about how they explain and enhance different aspects of what happens within the team and an individual to make them a better all-round unit. And again, one of his aspects of it, it's not apart from coaching. It's not separate. It is a part of it, and you are doing it. And every day you go out to take a team. All right. So the first thing that you go and ask a player, how you walk up to that player, how you give feedback to players. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it constructive? How do you get inside the player's mind frame? This is one of the and again, I'm taking this from Kieran himself. He done a bit of a presentation for us a number of years ago, and this is kind of where he had seen where the sports psych person might sit in, if there was one within a coaching environment. There might be one player, and a lot of people think, well, sports psychologist, he comes in and he speaks to the players as a group, and he gives feedback to all the group, or maybe in an individual aspect. But it's so much more than that. I found that, say for example, you've got really good coaches, really astute coaches, but the sports psychologist maybe not going to be there all of the time. He's not even involved in the coaching a lot of the time, whereas the coaches are. So if that sports psychologist can help aid the coach in terms of what their good practices might be, then that filters down to the team even more. So he could be able to help out with the likes of the sports science people. How do they feed back results to players? How do they give feedback to players? How does the manager feedback to players? How does the physio or doctor, feedback to players? And how do the players really, get the most off him? How can they really buy into, any wee bits of information that he can help in terms of his outputs? So hopefully, again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail because you can go down a rabbit hole with the sports psychology aspect, but there's a lot of good articles out there. And this is one of his articles that he had published and was in RTE news page. So what is a performance coach and how does your team need one? And then there's the link just down at the bottom. So the performance coach has become a very popular term within the last maybe 5 to 8 years. A lot of inter-county teams seem to be employing or having this performance coach. Nobody kind of really knows what the performance coach does, but he seems to be a notable figure of some sort and seems to have some sort of psychological impact upon the player. So he might even be just coming in as a motivational speaker. He might be there as a one-to-one type person, but it's probably keeping in mind, is that the right person with the right set of skill sets and right qualified set of skill sets to do that? Good article. I would recommend everybody to go and have a wee read on that later on, and how the impact of somebody influential like that might have as much negative as much of a positive impact as well. So we're just going to wrap up with the sports psychology part of it. I'm going to move very quickly on to the skill acquisition. So skill acquisition, much like the psychology, you're probably doing it daily in your coaching session. So we think, what is skill acquisition? You're basically thinking about how do you, get the best out of your players in terms of a skill-related environment. So this is a skill-related environment. The GAA, the games are skill-related. It's not like track and field where it's just run as fast as you can from point A to point B. It might be from how can I put different things in place to get them thinking outside the box or thinking in a different way to be able to improve their skill set. So this guy here, Phil Kearney, he's a lecturer in skill acquisition and coaching performance, and he is probably at the forefront of skill acquisition and how it's implied. His is his bit of a definition around it. He would say the skill acquisition is the scientific study of how we develop adaptable problem solvers in a movement context, and that's just like what I was getting at there. What are we trying to do? We're trying to develop adaptable problem solvers, which are the players. You're trying to get them to solve problems in different environments in a movement context. So as I say, it's not a track and field straight line run. There's so many different things and dynamic things that are happening within games all the time, and it's just trying to put the players into those problem solving areas to get the best out of them. Again, this goes back to, you can see the picture of Richie Hogan, and anybody can remember that goal. It was a fantastic piece of skill in a high pressure situation at a key period of the game. So no doubt he would have probably been exposed to those types of environments in his training, in his games, and it's just about how you can replicate that as best possible to get those players ready for whenever it does happen on the big stage. So again, for you as coaches, you got to think about how do you design your sessions, and I think by and large we're getting away from the lots of the drill-based environments where it's just puck a ball, go and catch it, run to the next cone. Are we thinking about how can we get the best out of the players in terms of interacting with them, getting them to think for themselves, putting them in environments where you might throw a curveball and say, well, this is what's happening now, deal with it. How are you going to problem solve this? So one of the guys who has really took this upon himself and developed it is Paul Kinnerk. And if anybody knows Paul Kinnerk, he is the Limerick coach and has been for ever since Limerick burst onto the scene. And he uses something called his games-based approach. So what is a games-based approach? And I'll talk about this a wee bit later on. So he done a study of junior elite Australian rules footballers and put them into different activities. And one of the things that he found by doing drills and this drill type environments, there was 0 decision-making opportunities. So they didn't have to think about anything other than where they were hitting the ball. It was just hit a ball, run, hit a ball, run. There was nothing decision-making environment in it. Put them into a game and up to 535 different decision-making aspects were recorded. So what does that tell you in terms of coaching? What should you do? You want players to problem solve on the pitch. Why do we put them into drills? All right. Yes, it might be a time and place at underage for putting them into drills and trying to get technique and get them striking and getting handling right and coaching and breaking it down and building it back up again. But in terms of a senior environment, can you get them to think for themselves? Right, the skill set is probably embedded at a good level. Now, how do you develop that skill set in terms of games-based approach? So, what is a games-based approach? So, throw them in, let them play the game. All right. Let's go, everybody in, play a game, right, stop the game, right. If something has happened, something is broken down, stop everything, bring them in, talk to them, right. We're going to fix it. How are we going to fix it? We're going to adapt something, change the game slightly to give you the output that you want. All right, so back into your game again and play. All right, so how might that look from a coaching perspective? Just going to move this out of the way just so you can see. So for you as a coach, what does a games-based approach mean? Right, observe what's happening in the game, analyzing it, evaluating it, and then plan what goes into your plan. So observing what happened, right? Something happened in the game, something didn't work out right. What do we do? All right, analyze, why did that happen? All right, so say for example, we're conceding too many goals down the middle. Why did it happen? We left the middle wide open. Right, was it important? Well, it probably was then if you had to stop the game. Right, so maybe conceding too many goals or too many scores from the central or a certain position. So what are you going to do about it? So you might say, right, well, I'm going to put maybe 16 players into this pitch. I'm going to put 17 players into the pitch, put maybe 2 sweepers in and get the players to figure out for themselves, right, how are you going to score now from that position? All right, so things like that. How are you going to change your element of coaching to be able to develop a games-based approach and make the players think for themselves, right? Because if it becomes too one-track minded, the players will be able just to develop one-track minds, all right? Put them into different dynamic environments, then they'll have to start thinking for themselves, start thinking a bit more dynamically. How does that happen in terms of your own coaching? How do you change what's happening in terms of, again, I'm going to move this out of the road. What do you need to change in terms of a coach to be able to adapt that game? All right, do you need to make the space bigger or smaller? Do you need to increase time or give less time? Do you need to say, right, I need to throw in a different task here? All right, say the equipment you're using, does it need to be modified in any way? Or say the number of people, all right? So say, for example, as we talked about, you're playing 15 on 15, one team is scoring a load of goals, right? We're going to put in 2 sweepers and see how many goals they score now, or we're going to bring back, maybe extra players. So hopefully you've all heard of the step approach. For you as coaches, you probably need to be on that at this stage and be able to be thinking about how you maybe look at the game, change something within the step approach to give you the right outcome, and then let them play again. All right, so that pretty much is how the games-based approach evolves through a session. Analyze what's happening, change something, back into game again. Very little time probably for skill acquisition or skill drills, and more time for playing the game in terms of the skills and what's actually going to happen in the game. Moving on to the last one, the performance analysis. Now, performance analysis, what a lot of people maybe think of is highfalutin software. You see the analysis that people have in the Sunday game with all these arrows and diagrams and stats, and that's all well and good. There's probably a lot for social media and for people on TV to look at and discuss. But performance analysis, as I say, can happen from top end to bottom end and everything in between. What is it? It's a specialist discipline involving systematic observations to enhance performance and improve decision making, primarily delivered through the provision of objective statistical analysis and visual feedback. So some of the key words that we're looking at there: systematic observations. All right, so you're observing what's happening in the game, and you're systematically coding it, recording it, and then feeding that back to improve decision making. So decision making, say for your coaches who maybe want to make a change, decision making for the players, maybe they choose out thinking, oh, geez, I didn't realize that I missed the pick maybe 2 or 3 times in that, or I didn't realize that I was striking off my back foot on that shot. So how do you give that back to the players? And as I say, not just through stats, not just through numbers on a sheet or on a board, but also how you correlate that back to video, because video is one of the most powerful things that you can do on a, say, a Tuesday night after a game. Go and revisit what happened on the Saturday or Sunday. Some of the key things in that game, feedback, what happened, all right, or what went well, what we need to improve on. This process happens all the time. If you're in the area of performance analysis, you need to think about what is your needs analysis for the team, and what is your system design. How are you going to collect the data? How are you going to produce it back? Once you've got that in place, you know what you're doing, then it's just capturing what's happening in the game, capturing the data, analysing it with the management, giving it back, feeding it back to players, and then that constant approach. You back out onto the training pitch Tuesday night. This is what we're going to work on based on what we looked at in terms of the feedback from the video. We're going to practice this evening, and the next thing that goes into practice. You put it through your training sessions, you go out to your game, then you review all the time. So it's always about reflecting, evaluating, and trying to get the best in terms of the stats and the video together. To think about the stats, these are just some of the simple ways that people have started and still continue to do recording stats, pen and paper. Notational analysis is one of the most popular and one of the most efficient ways of doing it. Some examples here, as you can see, the shot plot on the left, you get the pitch of the pitch, and then you're just marking on things that might happen in a game. So that might be puck outs, where they're landing. It might be puck outs won and lost. It might be shots, successful, unsuccessful. It might be turnovers. It might be frees conceded, etc. All those types of things can be recorded, so it builds up a bit of a trend as to what happens in what sector of the pitch, and can give maybe a coach a bit of an insight in terms of, well, here's an area where we're getting joy, or here's an area where we're getting exploited a bit and we need to do something about it. Tally charts, again, good for easy recording, good for highlighting, very, very good recall of information just straight after it. You can see it's very easy to read many numbers from what. The timeline on the right-hand side, you can see what happens. You can see trends of momentum. We've all heard this term, momentum. Team maybe gets 4 or 5 points in the trot. That sort of timeline there can tell a coach, right, well, they've got 3 points in a row here. We need to kind of do something to gain possession back, or to kind of take the sting out of this, or say for teams maybe on fire, you're talking about, can we keep this going? How can we keep the ball alive for as best possible? And then again, just at the bottom here, just a quick few calculations that you might want to do very quickly. Jot it down. Again, here's the percentage of kickouts or puckouts won, puckouts lost. Here's your shot efficiency, 9 out of 12, 75%, whatever it might be. So that's, again, all good ways that for you as coaches could be doing notational analysis and being able to give the coach or yourselves a wee bit of feedback. And a lot of the time you go into training sessions or games and you're thinking, oh, well, I know that we missed a lot of our chances, but that's maybe something to feed back to the players, but you don't actually know how much. So for you as a coach, it's good to back that up, that thought that you have in your head, with some sort of analysis or numbers that you can go into the team with and say, well, we're 50% on our puckouts, or we're 60% on our conversion of our shots. Like those things mean a lot to players, and as well as you as a coach. It's good practice for you knowing them types of things. This is a bit of a, let's say, top end type of thing. This is a piece of software in terms of performance analysis. So this is a program you could download on your computer. You could import a video to the game. Say you don't have the time to record all of this here on the game itself. You might want to go back, say, on the Sunday or Monday and review it. Type in a lot of the key things that happened in the game. So this piece of software is called MaxSport. There's other software out there. There's Sports Code, and there's Performance Sports, and there's a lot of different things out there. But the key thing is here, you're recording the stats of what happened in the game, but also you've got the video here to back it up. So you'll be able to go in to record all of this analysis, At the end of it, you would have something like this, a bit of a dashboard. So you generate your dashboard and you can see a lot of things that are happening here in terms of shot areas or puck out areas. And you can see a lot of things like puck or kickouts won, possessions lost. So if you were to click on any of these numbers, it would bring you back to the video of what actually happened here. So say, for example, you had the kickouts. You go to Kerry kickouts, 49% won. You want to see how many of those maybe that you won on your own kickout. You click onto that 18 out of 22 number. From there, that would bring up this number of videos, and you can click and watch through all of those videos in succession instead of having to go through your video and say, I want to go to a time 22:31 and then I want to go to 25:60 or 52 or whatever it is. So it's just a wee bit more time efficient from your point of view. But again, there's a bit of effort that goes into that in the background. It's just not downloading the software and away you go. There's probably a wee bit of work that you need to do in terms of building this kind of platform or dashboard or organizing it in the way that you want. So that's the performance analysis. I say one of the best things to do is start notational. It's one of the easiest things to do. Start taking down numbers, go and look on Twitter, find out people who do notational analysis or things that can help you get a wee bit of feedback, half-time, full-time, review after game. And then you might want to develop that into those sorts of things here where you can pick up some sort of visual dashboard and send this maybe out to the players and they get a better idea in terms of what happened in the game. So look, that's pretty much it. I know I've talked now for lots of 50 minutes. I'm going to open to the floor with a bit of a Q&A. Does anybody want to come in and ask any questions in terms of any of the aspects of S&C, performance analysis, nutrition, etc.? I'd be happy to answer a few. So if you want to, you can unmute yourself.
Trying to be a couple of questions, folks.
Ryan, if you want to even ask one or two to get them started.
Yeah. I suppose, Eoin, listen here, first of all, covered an awful lot, in that session. I suppose like each one of them topics, you could have two or three workshops in each one of them topics. But the idea tonight was to give everybody an idea of what is currently happening within sports science within Camogie. And there is the top end of things with the inter-county teams. That's what they'll be working with, and then there is the club and the junior teams and that there as well. So there's a lot to cover there, but I think that gives everybody a good idea of what is currently happening, and what is available to you. So it's up to everybody else, or it's up to everybody on the call here tonight to see, what knowledge you can get from tonight, and then I suppose grow it from here. In terms of questions, you mentioned about the heart rate monitors and that. If there's people here on the call or whatever, they're probably working with teams and they wouldn't have heart rate monitors available. How would you get around that? Would you be just saying to them, listen, maybe just split the groups into, do a simple Bronco test or something at the start, and then maybe split them into different groups? Or how would you go about that if there wasn't the heart rates available?
Yes, so I would normally do it by like a lot of players will have their own smart watches, and records heart rate analysis. So for me, after our fitness test that we would do, either a yo-yo test or Bronco test, if we were doing like a fitness block or conditioning type block, we'd maybe split them to maybe 3 or 4 different groups, and one person, at least as long as you have one person within that kind of band of people or group of people within that fitness zone, then you can kind of get a bit of a ballpark area as to when those players need to go and when to stop and when to start again. And it gives you a bit more, rather than if you can think about the top end person, the fittest person in your team, and the unfittest person in your team, and you're expecting them to go off at the same time, having maybe done a high intensity run, and one person has finished a lot sooner, he's going to get more rest. So he's a lot more freshly recovered. So you want to make sure that you're exposing the players as best possible to the right stimulus that they need. So I would put them into 4 or 5 groups and make sure one person within that group has a heart rate monitor on. As I say, most people will have one. If you can get 4 girls or fellas to wear one within a group, then you're getting a better idea and they're getting a better feedback in terms of what they should be doing as best practice.
Perfect, yeah, no, makes sense. Folks, any other questions there? Baron, be some questions? Very quiet night on. Normally we're here for an extra half an hour or so.
Here, look, I can again, I can hang on for 5 minutes or so if anybody wants to stay on and ask something individually.
Okay, folks. Well, listen. If there's no more questions, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap it up. Just on behalf of Ulster Camogie, I want to thank Eoin again for giving us his time this evening. You know, as you can tell by the way he's going through them presentations, you know, he's a wealth of knowledge there on such a broad topic that, you know, sports science, you know, all the different areas of it. So it's great to have somebody, you know, on the call tonight who with Eoin's experience and to share it with us as well. If you do have any questions on tonight's session, don't be afraid to drop me an email and I can pass them on to Eoin so can, and we can try and get them answered for you as well. But the whole idea tonight was to get you thinking about what is available and to try and grow your knowledge of sports science, because it is becoming more and more popular throughout our sports. So tonight's session was recorded. The plan is that this session will be put up on the, I'll just actually stop it now, sorry.